Good afternoon and welcome to a wonderful Wednesday. We are here for our weekly read aloud, and as you can see, I'm not in my office. Today I am at the world famous Cranky Al's. Now, if you've never had a Cranky Al crawler, you are definitely missing a treat. So make sure you stop by Cranky Al's and grab a delicious donut. So I'm in a donut shop today. Couldn't think of a better book to read than, of course, a book about donuts. So our story for today is called Arnie the Donut, and it was cooked up by Laurie Keller. Here we go. Arnie turned out to be just the kind of donut he'd hoped he'd be. Chocolate covered with bright colored candy sprinkles. Look at all of my sprinkles, there must be 1,000,000 of them. He was made very early in the morning at a downtown bakery, home of the best donuts around. Arnie was proud to be one of the best. He knew that people all over town made special trips to his bakery to buy donuts of their very own. They make special trips to Cranky Al's too. As Arnie sat on the tray, which had just been placed in the donut case, he took a moment to reflect on the amazing things that had happened to him that morning. Cut into a ring, deep fried, cooled, iced, sprinkled, and named Arnie the Donut. Arnie looked around and saw all sorts of donuts sitting nearby. Crawlers, yum. Cinnamon twists, donut holes, powdered, jelly-filled, eclairs, plain, cream-filled, iced chocolate, glaze. He tried to strike up a conversation with an apple fritter on the next tray over, but she didn't seem to want to talk. It is rather early. Maybe she's not a morning donut, Arnie supposed. It was 6 a.m. and the baker had just hung the open sign in the window. Arnie was fascinated as he watched customers stream into the bakery. One by one, donuts were chosen, placed in paper bags, and whisked away with their new owners. Someone by the dozen in giant boxes. "Goodbye," Arnie yelled to each donut. "Have a great trip." "This is so exciting. I wonder who will choose me." Just then, Arnie looked up and saw a man pointing right at him. "Moi?" Before he could say another word, he was pulled from the tray and placed in a paper bag of his very own. "Thank you, Mr. Bing. Have a nice day," Arnie heard the baker say to the man. "Mr. Bing, that's a fine name," Arnie decided. "I can hardly wait to meet him." Remember, we are at Cranky Al's. The ride to Mr. Bing's apartment was a little bumpy. Arnie was grateful for the soft napkin and the baker who had so thoughtfully placed underneath him in the bag. He had never ridden in a car and wished he could look out the window to see all the sights. But more than anything, he wished he could meet Mr. Bing. Why does he keep me in this bag? Arnie wondered. Finally, the car came to a stop and they were home. Mr. Bing carefully removed Arnie from his paper bag and placed him on a clean, shiny plate. "What a handsome plate," Arnie said to himself. "I'm not crazy about the design. I prefer a more modern look, but it's nothing a little paint can't fix." Mr. Bing gently lifted Arnie from his new plate. "Isn't that cute?" thought Arnie as he closed his eyes and smiled. "He wants to hold me." As Arnie relaxed in Mr. Bing's hand, he felt himself moving higher and higher and higher away from his plate. When he opened his eyes to see where he was going, he discovered that he was headed straight for Mr. Bing's open mouth. shouted Arnie. Mr. Big was stunned. He dropped Arnie back onto the plate. I was gonna eat you, he replied in shock. Eat me? Arnie shrieked, the sprinkles flying everywhere. Why would you do a thing like that? Do you make it a habit of eating all of your house guests? No, of course not. So why then did it suddenly occur to you to eat me? Arnie demanded. Well, because you're a donut. That's what donuts are for, to eat. Do you mean to tell me you've done this before? Yes, I eat a donut every day, Mr. Bing said sheepishly. Arnie froze. He felt sick and frightened and angry. He thought to himself for a moment, I must put a stop to this right away. I'll call the bakery and warn the others, whoever's left that is. Arnie knew that there was no time to waste and that he needed to be very sneaky in order to keep his plan from Mr. Bing. He turned to Mr. Bing and said in his sweetest voice, Excuse me, sir, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. My name is Arnie. Hello, Arnie, Mr. Bing stammered. I'm Mr. Bing. It's nice to meet you. Mr. Bing, would you be a dear and allow me to use your telephone? Arnie asked extra politely. Oh, well, okay, said Mr. Bing, and he handed Arnie the phone. As quickly as he could, Arnie dialed the number of the bakery. The baker answered the phone. Downtown Bakery, home of the best, Mr. Bakerman. Arnie frantically whispered, This is Arnie the donut. Do you remember me? You made me at 5:15 this morning, and I was brought about 20 minutes ago by a man who goes by the name of Mr. Bing. Yes, Arnie, the baker answered. What can I do for you? Now, I don't want to alarm you, but just moments ago, that man tried to eat me. And not only that, he claims to have eaten hundreds of us. I'm going to make a run for it, but I wanted to warn you so that if you see him coming into the bakery again, you can stop him. Oh, my, Arnie, I thought you understood. That's why I make donuts for people to eat. I can't believe it, Arnie gasped. Are the other donuts aware of these arrangements? Well, I think so, the baker said. Let me ask them to make sure. The baker yelled to the other donuts, Do you donuts know that you're gonna be eaten? Yes, we know, the donuts shouted back. We're delicious. Did you hear that, Arnie, the baker asked? Arnie was crushed. The phone dropped from his hand. He heard all he needed to hear. Arnie forgot all about his plan to escape. He collapsed back onto the plate, glanced up at Mr. Bing and muttered, All right then, let's get this over with. Go ahead and eat me. Mr. Bing gazed down at Arnie. I'm not gonna eat you, Arnie, he said reassuringly. I just wouldn't feel right about it now. Really? Arnie said with a huge sigh of relief. Well, I'm glad to see that you came to your senses. But since I'm not going to eat you, Mr. Bing continued, I'll have to figure out something else to do with you. I paid good money for you. I don't want to be wasteful. Of course not, Arnie agreed. What we need to do is each make a list of things I can do with you instead of eating you. Between the two of us, I'll know we'll come up with something. Good plan, Mr. Bing, said Arnie. This will be a breeze. I bet I'm good at lots of stuff. They both feverishly wrote down their ideas. When they finished, Mr. Bing asked, Would you like to read yours first? Sure thing, Mr. Bing, Arnie answered. Things Mr. Bing can do with me instead of eating me. Do you need a ballroom dancer? No, I don't dance. You could use a personal fitness trainer. I'd get too sweaty. How about a portrait painter? Oh, heavens no. Would you like me to entertain at your parties? Mr. Bing, I do not throw parties. That's what Mr. Bing said. I could be your chauffeur, but Arnie, you can't see over the steering wheel. I'd make a great bodyguard. And who would you protect me from? A cookie? All righty, Mr. Bing, let's hear what you came up with. Okie dokie, he replied. I just know you'll like some of these. I can do with Arnie instead of eating him. I could use him as a pincushion. Ouch, too painful. How about an air freshener for my car? How about not? Would you like to be a picture frame? I don't imagine so. I need a new bowling ball. Well, don't look at me. You'd make a fine paperweight. Boring. Then what about a doorstop? Try again. But there was nothing else on Mr. Bean's list. They were both completely out of ideas. Arnie and Mr. Bean were exhausted. They felt terribly disappointed. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Mr. Bean finally spoke. I'm sorry, Arnie, but it's clear that we can't agree on anything for you to do around here. This is difficult for me to say, but I think it would be best if you found another home. I know, said Arnie, fighting back tears. I'll just be on my way then. Is it all right if I keep this napkin to pack up all my loose sprinkles? Of course, Mr. Bean replied sadly. As soon as I get a job, I'll pay you back the money you spent on me. That's not necessary, Arnie. Arnie shook Mr. Bean's hand and thanked him for his kindness. Mr. Bean opened the door, and as Arnie left, he paused and said, I guess donuts really are only good for eating, aren't they? They both waved goodbye, and Arnie was gone. Mr. Bean stood in the window and watched as Arnie walked away. He walked past the flower beds and the mailboxes, the apartment manager's office. He passed the tennis courts, the swimming pool, and the clubhouse. But when Arnie reached the no dogs allowed sign at the end of the driveway, Mr. Bean suddenly came up with a new idea. Arnie, wait up, yelled Mr. Bean as he ran after him. Arnie turned back and stood. When Mr. Bean caught up with him, he was out of breath. I can't believe I didn't think of this earlier, Mr. Bean panted. Arnie, I've always wanted a dog and could never have one because they're not allowed here. But there's no sign that says no donuts allowed. Arnie perked up when he realized what Mr. Bean was thinking. Would you like to take walks and play fetch? Mr. Bean asked excitedly. You bet I would. Can you do tricks like rolling over? Rolling over? Look at me. I was made for rolling over. Well then, there's only one thing left to ask. Arnie, will you be my donut dog? Oh, Mr. Bean, I'd love to be your donut dog. From that moment on, Arnie and Mr. Bean were inseparable. Arnie liked being a donut dog even better than he liked being a donut. He went through a short phase of chewing on furniture and barking at the mailman, but after a crash course in obedience school, he graduated first in his class. Everywhere the two of them went, people would stop to pet Arnie the donut. No one had ever seen a donut dog before. Arnie and Mr. Bean had so much fun together. Arnie was the best pet Mr. Bean could ever have hoped for, and Mr. Bean was Arnie's best friend. The end. Arnie the donut. One of the things that stands out to me is the thought of personification. And we know that donuts can't really talk. But personification is when you give human qualities to something that's not human, and that's exactly what we did in Arnie the Donut. So a great extension activity to this book would be to maybe think of something that you know is non-human, maybe like a chair, and give it a story. Give it some non-human qualities. What would the chair that you're sitting on right now say to you? I really hope you enjoyed our story for the day, Arnie the Donuts, and I do want to again thank Cranky Owls for inviting us here. Stay tuned for some special treats that Cranky Owl has for us. We love donuts, just us and books. The world famous crawlers. Getting them ready. Now over here, this is what I just learned, that Cranky Al's also makes pizzas. So they are getting those pizzas ready. All right. And before they can get those pizzas ready, look at that dough. Oh, okay, he's gonna show us. Awesome. Let's see what happens, everyone.
All right, taking a lot of video here, perfect. So I'll kind of give you a walkthrough with it, just the whole process from here. So here's where it gets mixed.
Okay.
This is where it gets mixed. From when it gets mixed, it again goes and rises here.
Okay, now before you do that, can you say hello?
Hi, I'm Joey Carioti. I'm one of the owners of Cranky Al's Bakery here in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin.
All right, awesome. Thank you, thank you.
Woo!
Hey.
I can try that again. We can edit that one out. But so once it's mixed, then when it goes to rise, from there, once it rises, then we actually cut it up and divide it out into certain pound balls. So that's an 8-pound ball. And this is a very expensive machine that we've just been able to afford. And what it does is it takes all the air and sucks it out.
Okay.
So once it comes into there, then what we do is actually we bring it over to this machine right here. And then what we can do, here, I'll show you.
Oh, cool.
We'll show it.
You all are getting
Yep.
great
So
background
from here,
knowledge on this.
and
Here
then,
we go.
Oh, we go. That's a good corner.
All right, let's watch.
So then it's gonna, it's gonna flatten out all the dough.
Ah.
So for us, because we've been in business for 22 years now.
Okay.
And before, we would actually roll this out all by hand, and then we would hand cut it.
Gotcha.
And now we've been very lucky and fortunate enough to where we can now have a machine that can help us out with
Awesome.
us. And it's not even so much.
Look at it.
Yep, and
You
then
can see how it's being rolled out. All right.
just relaxing it. And then from here, what you're gonna do, and then what we do here is we go to cut it. If you want to put it under your head. So it slowly goes to the machine, and we drop it. So there's a 2-part process to this. That's going to make the dough get some air holes in it. And when we cut it, and it's a 2-part process because of the holes that are in there. What happens is if you didn't put the holes in it, what happens is the ball would fluff up, and these are making long johns, so it would fluff up and you wouldn't be able to flip it on the fryer. So it'd be like a giant ball. But this, what it does is it puts the holes in it, and then what we are able to do is able to make it the shape in the long john.
Okay, so you all know these are the starting process of Long John donuts. So if you love Long Johns, some have chocolate or some have vanilla frosting. This is the beginning of that process. How cool is that?
And from there, all we do is just you cut it up here. We just do it here, and then we put it on the sheets right there. And then what we do is then it goes into this wonderful machine over here, which is called a proofer. And it's a very humid and hot closet, basically. And what it does is it activates the yeast, so the donuts then fluff up. From there, then we're going to go over here. And then that's where we fry our donuts, right there. and then we fry it. And once we fry it, then it goes on the rack here to cool it.
All right.
Once we do that, and then we finish, and that's our wonderful process.
That's kind of what Arnie just went through. He went through this exact process.
A very delicious process.
A very delicious process. Unfortunately, he didn't think so, but I know that I do. Delicious process. And there are those world famous crawlers right out of the grease. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Also,